Welcome into Debate Night, everybody. We are back yet again with another show, and this is the first show of the year where we'll be talking current events because the Pro Tour season is underway. We had the Supreme Flight Open in Florida, and so now we're going to be kind of brushing up on our current events, as is the typical flow of the show. So it should be exciting, kind of hop into that rhythm because disc golf is back, and who couldn't be more excited about that other than these guys here? So we're going to get into it. We've got a new guest today, but we'll start with an old guest in many different ways, and that's Brodie Smith.
Yeah, back, man of the people. First episode where we actually get to talk about things that are actually important. So looking forward to that. Top comment last week. My random suggestion is if and when Brodie has the time on Sundays this year for him to go live and give us an enjoyable commentary of the live disc golf this year. I would rather listen to him give us commentary than pay for DGN and what their product is worth.
Now,
only issue is how do you, if I'm going,
you just gonna film it with your phone?
Yeah, like how are you watching? I love it. I mean, hey, I love it because I mean I did hear some things about the commentary this past week, but how are you watching the coverage?
That does seem like a problem.
DG, and how are you watching coverage?
It does sound
coverage
like
one tab, Brodie the other.
Exactly.
No, but this person wants
they were trying not to pay for DGN.
No, this person wants to cancel DGN.
Can't do that. Day one of the tournament.
PDGA Live, Brodie Radio.
Oh, they're just watching.
It's like radio.
Yeah, I can see it.
It does feel very on brand. Like I'm surprised we haven't seen some random pro yet, like go Instagram Live and film the coverage and do their own commentary. Like not see an issue with it. That feels very on brand for disc golf.
Yeah,
I like that.
We're also joined by Moses tonight. Moses is new to the show. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I started playing disc golf like 10 years ago. Took a really long break from disc golf, and then when COVID hit, just like everybody else, got back into it. So played just amateur for the past few years, and love disc golf, love watching disc golf, and excited to talk about Frisbees.
Right on. Who is your favorite disc golf pro tour player?
I'm a fanboy. I'm all about Simon, and if I had to pick like a smaller level player, I actually really like Austin Turner, who I'm excited to talk a little bit about later. But Austin Turner for me is a really exciting pro.
Okay, I love it. Hunter's back again, back in the light blue.
2-0 this year.
Yeah,
that's all.
Gosh, we got to put an end to that. And then
you're the only one that's in control of that, Trev.
You've been good. I'm not. Listen, I am a perfectly unbiased, fair point assigner, and Dustin can testify to that more than anybody.
Yeah, Dustin here. Much like the great Paul Macbeth early on in the show, I was one of the best. Made many finals, had many wins, but then last year it was awful. No wins, really bad. But this year, just like Macbeth had almost redemption at Supreme Flight Open, maybe I can have actual redemption on this episode of Debate Night. So
third place on this show still doesn't get you in the finals.
It doesn't.
But hey, podium.
Close.
That's all scalable. It should be a good show tonight. We got a lot of things to talk about, so we're going to hop right in. First things first, let's talk about AB. So Anthony Barella let what looked like a sure win slip away to a charging Ezra Robinson in the final round. What I want to know is, should players, particularly proven winners such as AB, be given a certain level of slack when blowing leads in tournaments when the chasing player shoots as hot as Ezra did? Do we lay too heavy expectations on players to protect leads when the nature of competitive disc golf is typically short 3-round tournaments and volatile scoring without much course management? So kind of a loaded question there. Brodie, unpack it for us. What do you think?
Well, first off, do I have the wrong definition of volatile scoring? Because I feel like disc golf doesn't have volatile scoring most of the time.
We'll go for it.
I feel like a lot of the courses we play, guys are going to shoot in this range, and it's not going to, vary that much. This course that we're seeing now, being, I believe it was the third hardest course on tour last year, has actually some decent scoring separation on some of these holes. Now, I'm sure some pros are going to say, well, there's some flukiness to that and whatnot. But I think the nature of disc golf is the fact that guys can go out there and consistently shoot well because there is no course management. When you add in course management, that adds in an extra variable that things could go wrong. The only time we really see crazy course volatility or score separation crazy from round to round is either difficult courses like this one or when the weather gets in there. Also, I wrote down here, there's also a reason that after hole 1, we all knew that the only 2 people that could win the tournament were AB and Ezra. Paul pretty much shot himself out of it. Ricky was too far. And it was really going to come down to those 2 guys, even though Kyle Klein was making a push and Simon was making a push. And let me just give you this stat. In the top 20, again, this is one of the toughest courses, and they made it even harder. In the top 20, only 11 players had more than 1 hole over par, and only 5 had more than 2 holes over par. So even on the toughest of toughest courses, there still isn't a lot of scoring separation happening.
Yeah, fair enough. Moses, what are your thoughts?
So for me, I don't think AB should be given any slack necessarily. He had a 3-stroke lead going into that final day. And he shot 11 down and 9 down the first 2 days. And all he needed was a 9 down to force a playoff, which in fairness would have been the hot round from a year ago in this tournament. But to me, AB is a player with a boogeyman. To me, like Gannon is that boogeyman in his mind, going back to USDGC from last year, or I know it's not necessarily on the Pro Tour, but like Memorial this year. He had a 4-stroke lead going into that final round. And to me, the mental game is all about what gets AB in trouble. Now, that said, I don't want to take anything away from Ezra. He shot a 1087 rated 12 down course record, which took the course record away from Paul and AB the previous rounds. So we can't take anything away from that necessarily. But I think it just goes to show how deep the field is at this point. There are, any given weekend, 15 to 20 players at a course that can shoot a course record, that can jump up the leaderboard and take over for that first spot, like Ezra did this weekend. So don't always think a player with a 3-stroke lead is going into the final round is going to win, especially what is considered at one of the harder courses on tour. But to me, AB had plenty of opportunities to win this tournament, especially in that final round. He missed 2 putts from C1. He had 3 OB strokes compared to only 1 from the previous 2 rounds combined. And to me, the best players in the world are going to be the ones with the highest expectations, and they rise to those expectations. And AB just doesn't have that consistency for me quite yet.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Obviously, there were plenty of opportunities on that course. He was quite a bit off the pace. Hunter, do you agree?
I don't know, man. I think calling what AB had looked to be a sure win is a little bit of a misstatement. I mean, he had a 3-stroke lead going into the final round at what we have all just said is one of the hardest courses on tour. Like a 3-stroke lead at a birdie fest course, sure, like, or a course where everyone's just going to shoot around par. But a course like this, yes, it's a very difficult course. But as we saw this year, there's a lot of scoring possibilities. So it would have taken a 9 under, which, yes, as Moses pointed out, he shot 11 under and 9 under. But those are both phenomenal rounds. That's how he built a 3-stroke lead. To expect him to have to do that again to force a playoff is a lot of expectation. So to say that it was what seemed like a sure win, I think Ezra, after the front 9, he probably had what felt like a sure win, and he was able to hold on to it. I don't think that AB should really, we shouldn't look at this too close. I mean, the guy was able to come back, still finish in second place, shoot better overall than he did the year before. He had realistically 1 really bad hole. You take that away, he shoots, what would it be, 6 under par that final round, which in a lot of cases would have been more than enough to win it. But instead, he's going against Ezra Robinson, who popped off, played out of his mind. He shot 12 under. And how much of that is because AB slipped on hole 4? We'll never know. But if we're just assuming Ezra's going to shoot 12 under, I think it was a lot to ask AB to have to shoot 9 under again. Was he capable of it? Sure. But should we be saying he blew a lead or anything like that? No, he didn't. He didn't fall past to like 7th or 8th place. He came in 2nd. The guy still hung around.
Okay, so Hunter, a bit more empathetic towards AB. Dustin, are you in that boat?
I am too. For context, for the entire tournament, there was only 6 rounds that were 10 under par or better. And there was only 3 additional 9 under pars for the entire tournament. So most good players who are on tour and doing well regularly were really at their best only shooting somewhere between like 3 and 8 under par each round for the entire tournament. So that's where you're at. If you average 5 under par, by the way, for the tournament, 15 under for overall, you were in the top 10 of this tournament. So this was definitely a very difficult course. I don't think a 3-stroke read is really giving you that much margin on a course that played the way that it did. Now, sure, it's true that AB shot the hot round, which was the then course record at the time at 11 under before Ezra broke it in the final round. And yes, he did follow it up with a 9, but to be able to keep that level of play, and when really no one else was doing it other than Ezra shooting it crazy, like I can't really harp on him too hard. And as kind of Hunter already mentioned, he really only had that one triple bogey that really killed him early on the front nine, and then I think he had like one bogey in the back nine. Without those, he was like right there still very much in the race. So it was really only a couple of holes the entire tournament that really took him out of it. And so when I look at it that way, and I look at the course and how it had more technicality, how it had more course management than many other courses that we see on tour, lots of tricky shots, lots of blind approaches, lots of very dangerous greens. Like when you think about all the obstacles that were being put out there, I don't think a 3-stroke lead is really blowing it for AB. Yeah, he's shot way lower in his final round than his first two, and you can maybe mark him for that. But again, I don't think many people were really blowing the water out of that course, and I think that was a really tough one.
Yeah, I think the way it feels for me in disc golf, especially the three round tournaments, and especially when they are at difficult courses, it almost feels like the guy who gets stuck in first place going into the final round is almost in a position to fail because, like you mentioned, it takes at least 2 insane rounds, usually 3 really good ones to win these tournaments. So, it's hard to be a guy like AB, play 2 incredible rounds, have a third round that was just, average for the field, and then get criticized for maybe blowing a tournament. But at the end of the day, that is also, like I think Moses mentioned, like there is expectations for the players who are supposed to be best of the best. Those guys are supposed to be able to complete that and close. So it is kind of a tricky one. It's not as black and white for sure as just choking away a lead.
Yeah, my rebuttal here is both things can be right here. AB was the odds-on favorite to win that tournament. He didn't. There was also moments in that round, right? The course management wasn't great on hole 4. He threw 2 bad shots that he was trying to get way too aggressive that ultimately ended up costing him a lot of strokes. So that was bad course management. And then in the middle of the round, towards the end of the round, hole 12 and hole 14, he had a chance to actually put pressure on Ezra. He missed the birdie putt on 12, misses the birdie putt on 14. And basically at that point, Ezra is able to just coast and not have any sort of pressure. The dude's trying to win for the first time. He hasn't been able to do it. He's been in multiple positions and hasn't been able to do it. And that is when you need to put a pressure on the guy to make him have to throw tough shots on hole 16, on hole 17, on hole 18. And he didn't have to. So that's where I think both can be true, because also if AB pars hole 4, doesn't get a triple, pars hole 4, makes the putt on hole 12, makes the putt on hole 14, he still loses by 1. So that is how well Ezra played. But Hunter, the king of momentum here in disc golf, you can't tell me that we might see a different Ezra down the stretch if AB actually can play to where there isn't this massive gap. I mean, after a couple holes, all of a sudden, Ezra now has like a 4-shot lead in the tournament. It was able to just kind of coast.
Yeah, breathing room is.
I think it was up to like 6 after round 4 or something like that.
I think it was after hole 5. It was 6 shots.
Yeah, it's a luxury to have breathing room for sure, and I think that certainly helped move things along. All right, moving over to FPO. FPO was wild. So FPO had a rather bumpy finish, full of missed opportunities, but also some clutch shots to keep the top of the leaderboard in a tight bunch. We've had our mixed feelings towards the dynamic of FPO disc golf in final rounds in the past. So I want to know, did this ending lean more towards nobody wants to win or an instant classic packed with drama? Moses, what do you think?
All right, for starters, I'm going to disagree a little bit with what you guys said on Grip Locked. I absolutely think this was Ella Hansen's tournament to win way before a playoff ever happened. Final hole, Ella's -13, Evelina's 12 down, Holland's 13 down. Ella throws perfect tee shot. Holland saws off a forehand, goes OB. All Ella has to do on her second shot is cross inbounds near the basket. She can go 100 feet OB as long as she still crosses the green. If she does, she has a 35 foot putt for birdie still. Instead, she saws off a forehand that barely makes it up the hill, goes OB short, and she has to throw from the bottom of the cliff. To me, that kind of mistake is entirely mental. It kind of reminds me back to 2023 Waco. If you guys remember when she's facing Kirsten Tatar before she had won an Elite Series, and she absolutely shanks a shot after Kristen lays up and throws OB. I had an old soccer coach always talk about these unforced errors. And to me, Ella just commits a lot of really unforced errors. And she seems like the type of player that would really benefit from an actual caddy helping her think through these types of shots. That being said, the final round was absolutely a classic. You had 3 players forcing a playoff, which when's the last time we've seen that, NPO or FPO for matter? But a better performance from Holland and Evelina could have won it, but that's always the case on the Pro Tour. I also want to disagree. I absolutely think if Kristen Tatar was at this field or in the field, she absolutely would have won this tournament. No doubts in my mind. But that's just my opinion.
Okay. Strong opinions there out the gate. Hunter, what do you think about all that?
Well, I mean, Kristen, I will say most likely would have won, but I think it's hard to say she definitely would have. You never know. And I think if these are our 2 options, I'm going to definitely lean towards nobody wanted to win. And look, a 3-way playoff, sure, we can look at it on statistics and look at it on paper and want to go instant classic, but let's look at how we got there. First, Holland has a bad missed putt on hole 10, which proceeds to lead to a bunch of fluffed forehands down the stretch where she got very nervy. She had probably 4 or 5 chances to win it, didn't capitalize on them. Evelina, the putting was fixed in rounds 1 and 2. Pressure comes on, putting's gone. And it was pretty bad. I mean, yes, down the stretch it was bad, but I mean, she also missed putts earlier in the round. She putted 46% in the final round when crunch time comes. That's not someone who wants to win, if that's how we're wording it. And then Ella, right? She was the one that, kind of Kristen Tatar'd her way into it, where she just kind of played around and let everyone else mess up until what Moses brought up, the actual crunch time to win. She has 1 shot to execute. She doesn't execute on it. And if we want to look at it, it wasn't just that 1 shot. There was also on the front 9, plenty of putting opportunities too. I mean, she putted 60% in the final round. She missed putts on hole 1, 2, 4, 8, 9, and then 14 she missed one, but that was a pretty difficult one. But she missed plenty of putts inside circle 1 where any of those goes in, she wins. So yes, we fell into what might look on paper like a classic, a 3-way playoff, but any one of them could have won it so many times, and it wasn't asking too much for one of them to execute on it.
Okay, yeah, definitely leaning more towards it just being kind of a result of the chaos, not necessarily skilled play that got us there. So Dustin, are you in the same boat there?
It's interesting because, like, if we're looking at the FPO field as a whole for the tournament and not just like the final, horse race that we had at the end, it was a similar situation to MPO where it's not like anyone was crazy shooting lights out. Like the best round, the first round was 500 that Holland shot. And then you weren't really having that many people actually even shooting under par throughout the course of the tournament. And so really what you get at that point then is that just no one's playing that well other than Holland Handley, who obviously is kind of one of the favorites coming into this. Macy Vela Diaz, who's essentially a crazy comeback player this year after not really playing last year, which is really cool. Rebecca Cox, who was pretty consistent last year. Then you had like Valerie and Evelina. That was basically your 5 people who were still in it after the first day. Ella was like 4 strokes back going into day 2. Then she's the one that kind of makes moves to get back into it. Kat Mertz had like a crazy final round to get kind of herself in the conversation for a little bit. But then I do think it does come down to exactly what you were kind of posing in this question, which is, yeah, it did really feel like no one wants to win. Because when you get to the back 9, Holland has a 2-stroke lead over Evelina and 5 over Ella, which is the eventual champion. So you have 5 strokes to work with going down the stretch. And yeah, I do think a 2 to 3 stroke lead on this course maybe didn't mean that much, but 5 does, in my opinion. And yes, Holland had some crazy mistakes. She had a couple of really bad forehands, as was mentioned. Obviously, Evelina's putting woes comes back, in the final round, which has been typical for her under pressure for seasons now. So at that point, I can't really know if she's just trying not to lose or she just can't win. She just can't fix that problem. How long are we going to keep talking about this before we just say she's never going to get it, right? And so that's a big question for me. But yeah, Ella was fantastic on the back 9. I think she did everything she could to win. Yeah, she had a couple errors, but compared to the rest of the field, I thought she played great and deserved this win.
Okay, all right. So the verdict's kind of out there, Brodie. Are you in line with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the contrast between MPO and FPO is pretty outstanding, right? Like AB's round was probably equivalent to all 3 of the FPO rounds, right? They had slip ups, they had moments of where they weren't capitalizing. If we see Ezra Robinson all of a sudden just like start collapsing as well, we don't. Like Ezra just kept making birdies. And if Ezra would have slipped, you better believe Paul or Ricky would have pounced on that because they were also charging towards the end of their round as well. So you just see a big contrast between MPO and FPO right now on the consistency side. And I think that's, to me, the big thing is I think it's okay if you have a big putt late in the round and you miss it. I think it's okay if you have a big throw late in the round and you miss it. But consistently doing it throughout the round, I think, is what kills the drama. We saw missed putts from everyone throughout the entire round. We saw people shanking shots off the tee from everyone throughout the entire round. So constantly seeing that, I think that really takes away the drama aspect coming down. And the other thing that is always going to be a struggle with disc golf is there is no defense, right? We see sometimes in the NFL or the NBA where the defenses start clamping down, the pressure starts getting to the office, and they can't score. But we can look at, wow, the defense is really playing well. There is no defense here. So when everyone just starts playing bad, you're just like, you're just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
You know?
It is definitely exaggerated, like you're saying, when you have an entire card, it just seems like collectively getting really nervy at once. And a lot of times it does result in fun chaos, but I think it seems like you are all in agreement. That's kind of what it is. It's fun chaos, but maybe not, the electric play that's leading to that. Maybe it's a lot more of the stumbling that's led to it. I was kind of in the boat that I thought it was not as severe as some of the stuff I had seen before. Like last season, there were enough decent shots, but like some of you mentioned, Ella not getting up onto the platform on 18 was bad. Some of the drives, like even just the forehand drive that kicks Evelina out of the playoff is just like inexcusable there. You've got to just get it out and play on a short par 5. So definitely was some sloppy play, but it's also the first event of the season. So we're only moving up from there.
The thing that ultimately needs to go away for FPO to really, I think in a lot of minds jump, is the missed putts. Because when you have one person stepping up to putt and everyone's watching going, they should make this putt, and they miss, and then there's someone coming that's even closer and they miss, which happened multiple times during this final round, it really just takes the entire air out of it. And I get it. We saw some rusty play from some people this weekend, from people that had to play indoors. What's something that you can do indoors and be really good at? Putting from 15 feet. And so that, to me, I think is the big thing on the FPO side, is when we start seeing that consistency at the top, I think we really will start seeing a kind of change of the narrative in tournaments like this.
Yeah, putting is always the most egregious offense in that, and especially at a course like Olympus, where a bad tee shot isn't going to look necessarily as bad there because there are quite a bit of obstacles. But yeah, the putting, it's hard to hide from the 15-foot putt.
I was gonna say,
I'll be the first to tell you.
It's the thing that we all know the difficulty of.
Exactly.
I can look at Olympus and it could be the easiest tee shot in the world, but if everyone messes up on it, I'm going to think that's a pretty tough hole. Putting, if it's a wide open 15-footer, yeah, I suck at them, but that doesn't mean I expect, I still know how easy of a putt it is in the grand scheme of things. So
Right.
when you see it, there's an instant, what it is, especially if it's a chain out or something, sure, that happens. But if it's just like an airballed putt or it didn't get there or something like that, there is a scale where we can all go and recreate that exact same putt at home. So it's the same on Impio side. When we see Aaron Gossage 5-putt in New Zealand, we don't need a commentator to tell us how bad that was. We instantly know because we've done it, but we know what those putts feel like.
It's true. It's true. All right. So we're going to talk about the course a little bit. A lot of you we've already kind of mentioned a bit about it so far, but I want to know, so Olympus made its second appearance on the Pro Tour, once again, opening up the season. I want to know, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the course, and where do you rate it compared to other stops on tour? We know where it rates in terms of difficulty, but where do you rate it in terms of just as a complete venue? Hunter.
This second year, I really liked this course. I don't know last year what kind of made it go under my radar a little bit more. Maybe just the newness. We were just so focused on it being a new event, and we were a little bit focused on it taking Vegas because we had just played Vegas. So maybe that kind of clouded my judgment. But this year, I really enjoyed watching it. I think that the low ceiling technicality that it provides almost a wooded feel with still plenty of openness, which I think spectator wise is great. It didn't seem like there was many places where it's like this hole just can't be spectated. Obviously I haven't been down there, so that could be the case, but from watching it still gave a lot of what was best about wooded disc golf. The rough looked really rough. Some of that sawgrass looked brutal to be in. You still had scrambling aspects. The OB I think is very great, where it makes players think. There's a lot of risk reward type of shots. Really, I think that when I was trying to think through weaknesses, the only one that came to my mind is a lot of blind tee shots, which I don't know if that's necessarily a weakness for the players, but I think on coverage, it can sometimes be a little bit confusing of where I thought players were actually going versus where they actually were going. That could get a little bit confusing, but the elevation also, I forgot to mention in the strengths, is awesome. It's something we don't get to see nearly enough of in disc golf. So to watch people do that and have to navigate that, I think is blast. As for where it rates, I actually looked up to see like where fans ranked it after last year, and they put it at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11th. And the courses in front of it that I disagreed with, there was 2 of them. So I think it is a top 10 course because they had Milo MacGyver and Toboggan in front of it. And I think that it would beat both of those. So I'm going to say probably like 9th, 8th best on tour.
Okay, 8th or 9th. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what I was expecting. Dustin, what were your thoughts on Olympus?
Yeah, I really liked the course overall. I felt like there was this constant theme throughout the course of elevation change, tricky greens, and then some technical shot shaping. And so I thought that it tested, a wide variety of skills throughout the course. You start right away with an uphill par 3 that is either a power forehand or a really technical low ceiling backhand straight shot to slight turnover. Then you go into a par 4 where you got to hit a tunnel shot. Then again, you have to hit either like a crazy stall forehand or a really technical backhand to get up to an elevated green that's on a slope and very dangerous. And I'm not going to sit here and go through every single hole, but as you go through the course, you see again like these cool cliff to cliff type shots that are like really fun to watch that require good angle control. As Hunter mentioned, you have situations where you either have blind tee shots or blind approaches. So you really have to make sure you have your course knowledge on where you want to be landing when you're doing your preparation for this course and game planning. And look, I think that it scored well. Like it wasn't one of those courses where everyone's just blasting off double digits on their par on a regular basis. Again, I mentioned it earlier. There was only I think maybe 6 times that someone shot under par at this course, and then a couple of 9-unders, but most of the time it was in kind of a more reasonable range of scoring, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, lots of variety, lots of tricky greens, demanded a lot of different shots. There were very few holes that were getting birdied like crazy. Most of them were under a 30% birdie rate. So yeah, I thought it was tough and technical and still fun to watch. And so I rate it up there very highly. I think it's definitely a top 10 course, if not even higher than that.
Okay. Top 10 as well. So far, both in favor of the course for sure. Brodie, what do you think?
Well, everyone said all the things that I like about the course. So I'm going to go a little bit of a different route. I'm going to say why I think it's not higher than a top 10 course, because I think they're pretty much in line with right around number 10 for me. There's a couple holes that are fluky, and I think trying to reduce that of where tree kicks can kick you out of bounds or certain lies. I know they changed like hole 14, for example. I think that's a terrible change. I thought that was a good par 4 last year. This year, terrible as a par 3. There's also a handful of par 4s and 5s out there where it's like if you just get a good drive, you're going to get a birdie. And to me, I always want to see par 4s and par 5s challenge each shot because of how easy getting up and down is from like 200 feet or whatever when there's no obstacles. I think you need to put more emphasis on making good shots being required for your second and third into a par 4 or par 5 on some of those holes. And then it just has a really bad finishing stretch. I think 16, 17, 18, 16, I wasn't a huge fan of it this year. I thought last year's 16 was a lot better. And I guess Paul says he's not super happy with where it is right now, but next year, or he said that about 14, but 16, I just think the way it played last year, I thought it looked better. And I think they changed it simply for spectators, which you hate to see that happen. And then 17, I'm not a huge fan of that hole. And 18, I think, is an okay finishing hole. And then also hole 1 being a par 3, not a fan of that always on a starting hole.
Quick question for you, if you don't mind. What do you not like about 16? Is it the tee shot?
I think just from the viewer standpoint, I think it's very hard to see what you're trying to accomplish. And it's very hard to see how a player messes up, where the last year it was a very tricky corridor, long stretch where right you're OB, left, short left, you're in the junk. So not only did you have to be accurate, because also if you didn't throw far enough off the tee, which that's my big thing with par 4s is make it to where not only do you have to be accurate left to right, but you also have to have good distance control, because if you didn't get far enough off the tee on that, you didn't have an angle into the green. So I thought last year's hole 16 was awesome. And this year, just from a spectator standpoint, you can't tell if the tee shot's good or bad until like well after the disc hits the ground.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. All right, Moses, wrap it up. Give us your thoughts on Olympus.
All right. So the first thing I want to say, we keep talking about this ranking and how it came out top 10. I think a lot of that has to do with the conditions of last year's tournament. We're thinking about this tournament last year where it was rainy. It looked like miserable circumstances. First year on tour for a lot of people. I think that's going to change this year. Absolutely. I would be surprised if it's not in top 10, at least top 5, in my opinion. And I don't think it's any coincidence, truly. I think Paul Macbeth has shown that he is a fantastic course designer. This original course was the Throwdown the Mountain course, and there's still a few original holes, but I think he does a great job using his insight as a touring pro to create a challenging, fun course for everybody. I will agree. There were a couple holes in the course that I think got worse. That original par 4 for MPO that got changed to a par 3. And then hole 16, like they were saying, I think that tee shot is just very fluky. Taking out a few more trees would probably help quite a bit. And it seemed like the team at Olympus is open to making those types of changes and improving the course as well. I also think the property itself is super unique. How many places in Florida do you see that landscape that they do have? The Spanish moss, the valleys, the mountains, all that kind of stuff. So in my opinion, I truly believe this is a top 5 course. At times, I don't think DGN does the best job covering it, especially with a lot of those blind shots. So I think that might be part of the reason why people aren't such a huge fan of it. But it's easily one of the best stops on tour, in my opinion. And it's a huge contrast to the Las Vegas Challenge, which used to be the first tournament of the year. Super different course, different type of tournament. And it looks like it's be a ton of fun to play as a non-pro.
Yeah, I think it opens up the tour well, because I think that as a first stop, like Las Vegas was an interesting way to open up the tour with like basically wide open golf course hyzers, even though it is a fun course just optics wise. Whereas this course, it's such a variety of disc golf is played at Olympus, because you do have to scramble a ton. It's not a ton of just stock shots. There's a lot of different options to take off the tee as well. So I think that it's great. Personally, I thought it was really good. There's definitely a few holes to improve upon, but there's really not any courses out there that are perfect all the way through. You just don't see it. There's always going to be a problem with certain holes. So I think it's definitely a top 5 course. It's really high up there for me. I'd have to scrutinize the list a little bit, but yeah, I think that people, I think you're right too, Moses. I think that the weather last year kind of set it, an early tone for it. Whereas this year, seeing it in better conditions helped as well. So
I think,
let us go ahead.
Oh, I was just say 2 things that I think they could do is force carries. A couple of these holes definitely need force carries, require people to have to actually start thinking about whether.
Well, you got to get a waiver for that, Brodie.
Okay, sure. And then I would also love to see different pin locations. Like just thinking one right off the top of my head, Sunday pin location on hole 18 should be like 5 feet off OB, the cliff. So like if you, because that's the whole miss that everyone's trying to not make, right? With how they'd run the OB on that hole. I still think that's dumb. I think that hole should be just like an island basically, right? Just to make it even more, but that would eliminate 2 people basically just doing the Simon rule, which there's chucking it super far OB and then having a pretty easy putt for par. You put that thing 5 feet from that cliff. Now, if you're trying to attack it, you might end up giving yourself a 30-footer looking right back down to where it's like if you miss it all, you're going OB. So that would add a little bit, I think, more juice to maybe that hole. Yeah,
I think it is a course that would suit multiple pins pretty well for quite a few. And I mean, those cliff shots are especially unique. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the property. I think most people are going to warm up to it pretty quickly though, because there's not a lot of courses that provide the kind of variety, and it's fun to look at. There's a lot of cool shots. All right, on to our last topic for our finals. Kind of a broad one here. So I just want to know, now that we have our first impressions for the 2025 season, we got our first event, got to see the Pro Tour in action, got to see all the players back. I want to know who or what stood out to you the most, whether for good or bad reasons. So what is the impression that jumped out at you the most, for whatever reason that might be? Dustin.
Yeah, so for me, on the MPO side of things, what jumped out to me was just the absolute parity that we saw at this tournament. Like, yes, you had some of the familiar faces that you would expect to be at the top of the leaderboard play at the top of the leaderboard. So, like AB, Wysocki, Heimberg, Klein, all those types of guys. But then you had a few people that you maybe wouldn't have expected, like a Jake Mon or an Austin Turner or, some of those types of characters. Meanwhile, you had some favorites that you thought would play well who didn't, like Gannon-Burr and Isaac Robinson. Yeah, they were still in the top 15, but they still didn't play nearly as well as you would have expected. And so for me, that parity could create some interesting storylines to follow throughout the rest of the season if it truly feels like anyone can go out there and win. And obviously, congratulations to Robinson for getting his first win. It's been a long time coming. But then for FPO, I think the thing that stood out to me the most was the return of Macy Vela-Diaz. I thought that this was a really incredible story. This is a player who obviously was off most of last year due to having a child. And there was also the whole sponsorship woes situation that took place kind of around that situation, which is kind of weird that she's back at DD now after all that, actually, funnily enough. But I think people forgot that in 2023, she was a consistent top 15 player on tour that had multiple podium finishes, some good top 10 results, including at some majors. She came 7th at Worlds that year, for example. And so to see her come back, the first event of her comeback to, hopefully fully touring, or at least something close to it, to kick off 2025 and to come out with a big finish, I thought that was a really cool story.
Yeah, no, I think too, it's a lot to say that, you look at the drop off, I think after her in the standings, realistically, where there's like 9 shots to the next player. So it wasn't like it was some fluke where you've got an easy course and maybe a lot of parity. Like, no, she separated herself with some players that are the best of the best. So that is going to be a player to watch. No doubt about that. Brodie, what jumped out at you for the first event of the year?
Yeah, the good side, I'm going to go, I think, to go off of Dustin there. Macy, I think, jumps off the page. She played 2 events last year and ended up finishing 5th. Now, the big thing with her is, like, can her ceiling match the other girls' ceilings, right? Because no one played great that final round. So it's like, if someone plays great that final round, she's, well behind. And also the sponsorship issue, like, that's a major issue of not having a sponsor and then, kind of getting one late. And I think coming out to the gates and having a good performance is awesome to see from her. I think on the MPO side, my good's going to be Paul McBeth. He actually looks like he's in solid form to start the season. If you remember last season, his first 4 finishes were 52nd, 64, 22nd, and 57. So coming right off, having a top 5 finish in the first one is nice to see. The bad's got to be Gannon-Burr here. Shoots 13 under, tied for 12, 16 shots off the lead. Initially posts something before the tournament saying, hey, my finger's jacked up. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to throw different grips, but I should be fine. Then all of a sudden, after the tournament, he's coming out saying, I have a neck issue now. He's going to be getting slammed for that from social media, so he's going to have to be dealing with that. And then Missy Gannon, +6, T15. Trevor calls you out in the press conference. You don't show up to this tournament. Last year, your worst you only finished outside the top 12 once, and you already do it in the first event of the year. Not a great start.
Not a great time for the Gannons. That is for sure. Moses, first impressions. What are you thinking?
I gotta say, I really think blowing it out of the water, the whole Gannon thing. I mean, yeah, he was making excuses saying, pre-tournament, talking about feeling off and everything. But you also have to remember, this dude lives in Des Moines, Iowa. Like, he's not practicing that much during the off season. I know he went up to Massachusetts, not much better weather there. So I don't really think that he's getting a whole ton of practice in the off season. I know he played the Memorial. That's a Heiser Fest. I don't take much stock in that. So I think he'll be perfectly fine. Wouldn't surprise me if in Texas we see him back in the top 3, if not taking down a win. I would say Jake Mon in 6th is huge. He had only had 1 top 5 on the Pro Tour before that, so that's massive for him. Another player, like I said, Austin Turner. Remember, this dude last year was unsponsored by a manufacturer, and I think that's a hugely underappreciated player, especially for the content that he produces, but also I truly believe that he's going to be up there as a top 30 player this season. So kind of crazy to think about the fact that he wasn't sponsored. I also have a pretty big prediction. I think this is going to be the year that we see Eagle pop back into place. I think people forget how dominant he was back in 2021, having those 4 Pro Tour wins. And I think he looked pretty decent this weekend, and I truly believe he's going to win again this year. In terms of FPO, I am someone that has been duped time and time again about Paige Pierce. I've been waiting for her to come back after this injury, wanting to see this version of her that we thought existed. But to come in 11th place is crazy to me, especially in a field without Kirsten Tatar. She has to be finishing top 10 in my opinion. So lost a little hope there.
Yeah, I always think Austin Turner is fascinating too because he's very talented, but the left-handed player has not had a lot of success on the Pro Tour, and so I think that's always interesting to watch with him. This course favored a forehand throw, so I think it's set up for him. But yeah, he's been pretty solid whenever he's been healthy and touring. So
He's good.
Hunter, lastly, what are your impressions?
Well, no one else took him, so I'll take Ezra Robinson first for the good, mainly because, yeah, we saw last year him popping off, and we knew this was coming at some point. But the level that he showed on a course that going into the week, you would have thought, hey, I hope he can kind of get into contention. But he wasn't really, at least I didn't see anyone, he was the favorite to win. You're thinking of bigger arms. You're thinking of people with big old forehands, especially some of the tricky greens you got to approach. And you don't really put Ezra Robinson into either of those categories. But what we saw was especially his putter got extremely hot when it needed to get hot. He made some very tricky putts. His backhand is more than serviceable. And we discovered that he has the same, basically, I'll walk it out there and place it wherever the frick I want to gene that his brother apparently has. So got to figure out what they're eating down there. The other good I wanted to briefly mention was Kayla Viska, because if you're thinking about it, similar thing where this is not a course you expect Kayla Viska to do good at all on. You aren't really thinking Dr. Smooth is going to go out there with his 40-year-old back and be crushing out there. Yet here he is inside the top 20. Very, very positive start for Kayla Viska coming into this season. And the bad, I am going to go with Missy Gannon. We let her off the hook a little bit on Grip Locked, and I want to rescind a lot of that, mainly because I realized something. We were talking in the same breath about Silva Saarinen, and a lot about like Silva Saarinen and Missy Gannon. I would basically put them in a very similar category. Silva Saarinen proved in the final round you can score out there. You don't have to have the distance because she doesn't have the distance, right? And she still was able to go out there and shoot 6 under par. She was able to still shoot under par for the tournament, yet Missy Gannon, 6 over, 19 strokes out. I think you got to be questioning that.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Can I rebuttal Moses though, real quick?
Go for it.
Because I feel like you defended Gannon a little bit, and I think you kind of maybe missed my point. First off, I do kind of disagree with the fact that you're saying you don't think he practices. I mean, he has a built-in basement strictly for his practice. Also, you got Alden Harris who built that like warehouse. Those guys are practicing. And it would have been different too if he would have said that as an excuse, like, hey, I really didn't practice this much this offseason, guys. I'm a little rusty. Don't worry about it. My whole thing with him is like, it's just when you are the number one player in the world, everyone's looking at you and everyone's expecting you to perform. If we start seeing this, and we have seen it before, this isn't the first time we've seen it from Gannon. If we start seeing a pattern of something has always happened, and that is why I didn't win, or that is why I am where he is, he's going to start getting a lot more pressure. Because if you look at any other sport, when other athletes do that, people tend to not like it. People liked when you just come out and say, hey, it wasn't my weekend. And especially in a sport like disc golf too, where if we all said like in basketball, hey, we're going to do a 3-point shootout, who do you guys think is going to win? I think we would all have the same answers every single time. And I think it's very similar a little bit in disc golf, of where we've seen, like, if you're the best and you're super consistent, which makes you the best, you should be always up there. So him not being up there, I think that is a concern. And the fact that he went the way he did go about it, I think that's going to cause a lot of questions. That's all I'm saying. I think people are going to start asking questions.
My only response to that is it is the first event of the year. Sure, Gannon may be having these issues. But like I said, I truly would not be surprised if he comes out in Texas, picks up a top 3, picks up a win. And if that doesn't happen, then sure, those questions can start to be asked about him.
No, my thing is more like, just if he had a bad start, just don't say anything. The fact that he came out and he's basically making these claims of why he had a bad start, I'm saying that is what's putting him in the spotlight more. I don't think that many people would have talked about him if he hadn't done it.
Do you think it changes anything, the fact that he said it before the tournament?
Before and after. Yes.
Before. I mean,
well, the problem with disc golf is we've talked about this before. The problem with disc golf is a lot of the information is having to come from the players. So if Hunter reported, it looks like Gannon Burr is having some issues with his finger and having to change, like that narrative changes. It does.
I might need to let Gannon know that he can text me so that I
Yes.
can just do dirty work for him.
Yes, because if
I noticed
yeah,
he looked a little bit off today with this finger.
yeah, if Trevor would have gone on grip locked and been like, yeah, Gannon didn't have a great finish, but he's having some neck issues, it looks like. And he's like, that is a different narrative than posting on your social media saying, hey guys, my neck's jacked up. Can anyone help me?
Yeah.
First off, Gannon, go to a doctor. I don't know why you're asking Instagram for help, but you see what I'm saying? And like, you just don't want to create a pattern. The dude is really good. He doesn't need to make excuses for himself. Yep. He's very, very good. And all I'm saying is if he goes down this route of always having to defend when he doesn't win, I think that's going to do, what's the phrase? More good than bad, more bad than good, whatever. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely has been a pattern at this point. I think a lot of it probably comes from self-pressure because when you have a season like last year and then you finish, oh my goodness, in the top 15, you already feel like you have to dig yourself out of the hole. But yeah, it's added up a bit at this point. It's become a narrative.
Yeah, we question it more if you have to make excuses for why you do it.
Yeah, if there wasn't a thing said and it was just like a post where it's like game is a little bit off, then we would all have been like, yeah, no big deal.
Watch out for him in the next one. But the fact that he's having to defend himself, I think that's where like people are like, okay.
It's also not a tournament he won last year. It is. It's definitely something that hopefully comes with.
But yeah, you definitely, Trevor, you definitely be his insider guy now. You should actually be everyone's insider.
If you got an injury, text me.
If you're not feeling well, here's the thing about these disc golfers too, and I know specifically Gannon's group of friends. When those guys play practice rounds, they will generate absolute beliefs on how they're going to play in that tournament. I know it's how a lot of golfers are. That's how the golf game can be. But when Isaac won Worlds, everybody in that group said they knew it was going to happen during their practice rounds. And when they don't play well,
I think they told us when we were filming with them. I'm pretty sure they were all being like, "Nah, this is not my week. You got to watch out for Isaac this week."
Exactly. When they don't play well in practice, they literally would just be like, "Yeah, it's just not going to be good." Whether that's good or bad or whatever it is,
I'll have to ask Ezra tonight if that's the case.
So
if
did everyone know?
Did everyone know that you were going to win basically going into this tournament?
Yeah, I don't know.
The practice squad was like, "Dang, dude, it's not my weekend. Ezra's popping off, and my fingers bruised."
Yeah. Anyways, all right, we're gonna get into our finals. Brodie and Dustin, you guys are tied, so we'll do a little tiebreaker. Whoever can. You guys, neither of you have the scores pulled up. If you do, exit out of them.
What does that
cheating.
mean?
From the scores from the tournament.
Oh yeah,
yeah, I'm not.
Okay, whoever can tell me the closest Raven Newsom score to par for the tournament.
Jesus Christ!
So what do we?
Wait! I want to go second because I think Dustin's just going to go off of my guess.
Oh.
How about you just say it on the count of three? It was under par. I'll give you that much.
I'm just gonna break it. I'll go 9 under par.
Okay.
4 under.
Ooh.
It was 9 under par.
Wow.
Freaking Raven Newsom.
He finished 24th. Shout out. There's a lot of fun names.
I'm gonna tell you what, I was gonna be screwed until you said it was under par.
Yeah, if you wouldn't have said under par, when you said under par, you zeroed it in. You zeroed it in there's only 20 some numbers now.
Yeah,
that is true.
I mean, over par, it was up to 40, 35 over. Yeah. You had a 70 number rate.
That helped me big time. Anyway,
fair enough. All right, Dustin, you'll move on. Final question. Here we go. Hunter, do you want to go first or second?
I'd like to go first.
Okay.
Go for it.
So we once again saw fans talking about a course volunteer OB incident, this time when a scorekeeper tripped on a line, keeping a Simon Lizotte shot out of bounds. Where do you stand on these somewhat recurring mishaps between spectators and thrown shots? Do you think the Pro Tour could and should do as much as humanly possible to reduce these incidents, or do you believe these occurrences are almost always a result of poor luck and committing time and energy to preventing them is fruitless and unnecessary? Hunter.
So I think this is a very interesting topic that gets brought up a lot. And when we were talking about it, some of our opinions were based on golf, shots go like ricocheting into the crowd and so on and so forth. I think the difference between why it's not perceived the same way in golf versus disc golf is by the time a golf ball gets to the crowd, it is basically guaranteed a bad shot. Whereas in disc golf, we use so much more of the airspace because we're curving shots in right to left much more drastically and much later in the flight. So it's likely where the preferred line might be a hyzer over a certain area back into the fairway, which causes this problem that we see recurring. So I think that is why the perception is already set up to be as it is, a little bit different than other sports, if that makes sense. Do I think the Pro Tour could do much more? And to be honest with you, no. I think they could push spectators back a little bit, but you already have a lot of issues of spectators not being able to see that much on certain holes. Spotters are already in a lot of times good spots. This wasn't even a spotter. He was a scorekeeper, and he was exactly where he should be, right behind catch cam. So maybe catch cam needed to be in a different spot. I don't know, but I do think it's poor luck. But I think one thing that the Pro Tour could do that from my experience doesn't always happen is maybe communicate more clearly with visually on the course during practice rounds of this is where spectators are going to be. It wouldn't necessarily plan into this event because hole 16, there was a very specific shot where this disc almost had to kind of go out of bounds and come back in. But there are certain tournaments where players are planning for like low skip shots or high shots to be coming in, and they just don't think about all practice week. I can skip off of this patch. I can skip off of this patch. And then all of a sudden come tournament, that's where the tournament director had planned spectators to be. And now the shot you practice isn't there. So I think having something throughout the week of saying spectators are going to be filled in here, then if the player decides to still go that route, that's a risk that they have chosen all practice week to say, I'm still going to throw over the spectators. And then you're the one assuming that risk. But Pro Tour has a bunch of other stuff they need to worry about before thinking about this.
That would be like some galaxy brain course management. I actually wonder if any players, I'm sure it's happened, but if like any player has really gone to line up their shot on day one and been like, oh, there's people there now. Dustin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, obviously you should try to do all that you can to instruct spotters and marshals and whatnot to have best practice to try to avoid these types of situations. Obviously, also TDs and course staff should be trying to do their best to space out spectator lines and OB lines as much as possible to try to prevent these things from happening, not only for a play standpoint for the player, but also just the safety of the crowd. And I think particularly what is damning in this situation, it was a blind shot. And so when that type of thing is happening, you just multiply the risk at that point, because now all of a sudden you don't really know when the disc is coming, if you're that guy by the line or something like that, when it's going to crest the hill, when it's going to be kind of coming at you. And I think at the end of the day, you know, these things are always going to happen, because no matter how much you instruct these people, or even if you get paid staff or something, there's always that chance in the heat of the moment when a disc is coming at you fast that you're just going to naturally react, and it's going to be very tough. And the thing is, you want them to be close to the OB lines because you want them to give you the most accurate spot possible, right? That's the reason why we have those people out there, so they can give us the best information possible. And that means that you're going to sometimes be in a dangerous position. And now, in this case, he was near the OB line. We've obviously at times, I think what happened to AB on a golf course where a guy was actually in the hazard on the fairway, those are two completely different things, you know, and really there's just not much you can do about these like OB lines other than kind of what Hunter was saying, kind of instructing where people might be. Here's what I'll say though. And just to try to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, I guess, if you're a player and you're throwing over out of bounds, you're taking the risk that your disc is not coming back in bounds no matter what. And I get that some of these situations are constant and understandable and people will accept them, like a water, fence, tall grass, things of that nature. But even if it's not a person, let's say it was just a wooden stake. We use wooden stakes all the time to mark OB with like line wrapped around them. And those things are like what, sticking out like 6 inches off the ground, and they're spaced out maybe every 6 to 7 feet. You might hit one of those when you're coming back in bounds and not make it back in. That is the risk you are taking when you decide to throw a shot shape that puts your disc over out of bounds. If you don't want to have a risk of it not coming back in bounds, then don't bring OB in play on your shot shaping and your game planning.
Yeah, valid. And it's also something that I think to consider too in course design as well. I mean, if we get to the point where courses are being designed to be played at the Pro Tour level, you know, maybe you have to think about, hey, if the best way to play this shot is skipping it from out of bounds, maybe it isn't the best shot. Like maybe this hole needs to be reconfigured, because you do have to consider that stuff at some point. But yeah, I think I mostly agree there. Yeah, I think that you know, it gets blown out of proportion a lot. I think it almost helped that this incident happened, because it was such an obvious like bad luck, not really anybody's fault thing. So I think it kind of like got people talking about it without being so heated like they've been in past situations, and maybe approaching it from some different angles. But it's always going to happen to some extent, right? Like you mentioned, in the heat of the moment, when there's a disc flying at you 80 miles an hour, you may not have the clearest mind, especially when the disc came around a corner and you didn't even know where it was coming from. So that's always going to be a factor. All right, that's it. Hunter wins again, slim margin, but again, a winner. Don't really know what's happening. I think I may have to let Silas press the buttons next week so something changes.
Victory lap, all I'll say is this might be the one case where if the spotter or the scorekeeper in this case would have tried to straddle the disc, it might have actually worked out.
It might have. It might have. Tough to say. If you want to submit a topic for next week's episode of Debate Night, make sure to scan the QR code here on the screen. We are obviously in current events, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about other broader topics. We're always looking for interesting things to go over. So although we will have, and then actually next week, I believe I have an off week before Waco anyways. So I think we will have kind of an open week. So get the topics rolling in. So we got some things to talk about in the absence of the Pro Tour before we get into the Texas swing. But we'll be here all season. So make sure to tell your friends, share the episode, and go to Instagram and vote for your winner in case you think I got it wrong. I forgot to post it last week. Apologies. As per Trevor policy, personal policy, once I forget to do something, one thing, it's now repeating iPhone notification for the rest of my life. So it will never be forgotten again. That's how we roll. We'll see you next week.